Ah, yes, it is that time once again. Double coverage sports talk presented by Elevated Sports, and it is a special episode here on the podcast. Episode number 30. It's incredible that we've done 30 of these over the last year and a little bit. And we have a special episode. We did another mailbag for you guys. I think, when was the last time that we did this? Did we do it for episode 20 maybe? 19.
Yeah,
You let all the fizz. Dr. Pepper. It is flatter than West Texas now.
Oh, have mercy.
Usually they talk about like wine sommeliers. I think Luke qualifies as a Dr. Pepper, God's nectar sommelier.
Gosh, I am a Dr. Pepper connoisseur.
Oh, absolutely.
In every possible definition of
These intros get more and more unique.
They sure do.
So we go along. We had, who did we have? We had Logan barge in, I think, during the last episode.
Yeah.
So that made our intro to that one unique. But like I said, episode 30, it's been fun getting to record these over and over again. And we did another mailbag episode and took questions from you, the fans, and the listeners. And we have a good slate of questions. I don't even know how many questions we have, but we have a number of them to get to. And they're obviously sports and then some faith-related questions as well that we'll pepper in. But first and foremost, Luke, I got to know how you're doing on the Friday before spring break.
I am hurting.
Not the answer I expected, but all right, please continue.
Physically hurting. I took a charge last night in my intramural basketball game. Massive scrape in my lower back. So my short waistband is just destroying it right now. I woke up this morning and I got to bed and I was like, oh my gosh, I just got knifed in the back.
Yeah.
And I asked my buddy, what is this? He said, oh, yeah, you're banged up a little bit. But I'm averaging about one charge per game.
Okay.
We're 0-3 on the season.
Okay.
So we're in the easy bracket for playoffs.
Hey, there you. That's smart.
Good. Hey, we'll play longer.
That's smart.
Yeah, physically hurting.
Yeah.
But besides that, great to be on the airwaves.
Yeah, I'm playing intramural softball this semester, and our second game went into second a little bit too hard. I slid, which, usually in a softball game I don't care, but the guy who's hitting behind me just could not get the ball past the shortstop, and so we needed runs. I was determined to try and beat out that throw to second base. Didn't. I woke up, I guess, 2 days later, and, my whole left leg, lower leg, was just one gigantic bruise.
We're just getting so old.
Am I past my prime? I'm 22, and
very much so past our primes. I speak for myself, very past my prime.
Yeah, peaked in middle school, beginning of
junior
high, I guess, into junior high, something like that.
Dude, I was 175. Actually, 7th grade, I was 6'1", 119 pounds. I was the definition of Flat Stanley.
Wow.
Junior and senior year, I was 6'4", 175. Mm-hmm. And then now I'm 6'4", 230.
It's all the Dr. Pepper, right?
It's all the working out accumulated over time.
Something like that. My goodness. Well, if you chose opening the show with sports injuries, you win a fan package courtesy of Elevated Sports.
That's right.
Please DM us, and that'll be shipped up to your current address. But we got a number of questions, like I said. We'll get to the first one here, Luke, and this one comes from Graham Williams. He says, develop a starting five comprised of exclusively one-time All-Stars. So at one time in their lives, they stood atop the proverbial mountain, and your task was to come up with the starting five, and I believe you even included a bench player here, so go ahead.
I did. So I did a little digging here. Thank you, Graham, for the question. Phenomenal question.
I did not, so this is Luke's question exclusively.
So I'll start position by position. At point guard this is for one-time All-Stars. At point guard, I'd have Nick Van Exel. Very underrated. He's a Mavs great, if you will. His career average... Wow, the graphic
it's not
is
pretty.
all cattywampus here. But his All-Star season, I think he averaged around 14 and 7. Super shifty with the ball, really good player. At shooting guard, I would go Danny Granger. Now, his All-Star year, I think he averaged around 25 or 26 points a game. A sharpshooter. He's like the second coming, probably a poor man's Reggie Miller. Both players in Indiana. Really fun to watch. At small forward, I'm going to go home here and do Josh Howard. Now, pre-marijuana Josh Howard before he took his exit from the league. But 07 was an all-star. That 2007 Dallas Mavericks team won 60 games following the finals loss to the Heat, the same 2007 where they lost to 8th seed Golden State in the first round of the playoffs. Heartbreaking.
Ouch.
MVP Dirk as well. Yeah, so MVP Dirk and then All-Star Josh Howard at around 18 points a game. I loved watching Josh Howard.
Yeah.
I was watching old Mavs highlights going through this. Just like 2005 to 2007 NBA was so fun to watch. I guess because that's when I first started really becoming a fan, and that's when it was first ingrained in my memory.
It's where guys settled their beefs on the court instead of Twitter.
Yes. When was the Malice at the Palace? That was then, right? Early, like 2004, maybe?
Yeah, I'm going to Google that. 2004 sounds early, doesn't it? I hope I spelled Malice right. Yeah, no, 2004. You're right.
2004.
Pacers, Pistons. Yep.
Man.
Rare and raw footage of the Malice at the Palace.
Man.
See all the blood, sweat, and tears.
That's right. Ben Wallace.
Oh, yeah.
Man. And then moving on to power forward. Now, I was told to give a shout out to this player regardless going forward. But Mehmet Okur, power forward, he won a championship in 2004 with the Pistons and then was an all-star with the Utah Jazz.
Okay.
The Utah Jazz with Okur, Andrei Kirilenko, Darren Williams, very fun Jazz team to watch. But Mehmet Okur, like 18-8 maybe that year, his all-star year. He's like, I would say he maybe is like a poor man's Dirk. That may be a loose analogy there. But very good player. He's a gargantuan human being. Love him as a one-time all-star. And then at center, I got to go Tyson Chandler.
Oh,
one-time
yes.
all-star. An all-star in 2013. Very delayed all-star. I think I was like 12 seasons in. He's like a 9-8 career guy, but he's so tough. For all you just basketball junkies out there, Tyson Chandler might have the greatest high school mixtape of all time. 7-footer. I mean, there was rumors he was touching the actual top of the backboard in high school, which seems impossible. But Tyson Chandler is just a gritty guy, especially for my lineup here, having a core at power forward. He's a scoring 4, having a defense, rebound, rim runner, tough guy in Tyson Chandler. Who I didn't realize, this is kind of unrelated, he played for the Bulls for 6 years to start his career, I think.
Oh, wow.
I didn't even know he played for the Bulls. But he's played for a fair share of teams. But that's my starting 5. And then off the bench, I'd have to go Andrei Kirilenko.
AK-47.
Man. Seriously, I forgot about that. That's crazy. That's awesome that it worked out. I wonder if he picked 47 on purpose for his number.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think he probably did, right?
Yeah. I don't know how in tune he was.
I'd like to think that if he picked those horrible wing tattoos on purpose, he also picked his number on purpose, just to even it out a little bit.
Man, Kirilenko was a Mavs killer. I mean, he killed a lot of teams, but man, just these OG players.
Just a Russian assassin.
Thank you, Graham, for just giving me reason to look deep into the depths of mid-2000s basketball. But those are my 5 to 6 players that have for one-time All-Stars.
Yeah, I like Tyson Chandler a lot. I mean, he's a guy that's not necessarily going to fill up the stat sheet, but just over his career, he's brought such unity to a clubhouse, to a locker room, and obviously he does his talking on the court. He's a great rebounder. He's a solid piece that, the Mavs let go way too soon.
Yep.
There is no way that he should have ever been in a Suns uniform after that championship, and you felt his departure immediately in the following years after 2011. So Tyson Chandler obviously is a personal favorite of mine, and then like you said, Andrei Kirilenko, that man just slaughtered the Mavericks. I mean, it felt like every night that he laced him up against Dallas, he was going to do something that he didn't do the other 3-4 nights of the week. So great list there, and of course the sniper Danny Granger as well. Next question also sticks with basketball. Who has a higher ceiling, Ben Simmons or Dennis Smith Jr.? This is from Brett Morrow.
So I've been heckled by this. Back when, I'm gonna protect my Mavs players here.
Yeah.
Former Mav, if you will. So I would always say Dennis Smith Jr. is a higher ceiling than Ben Simmons. Now, part of it was joking just to heckle my buddies, because obviously Ben Simmons is very, very good. And Dennis Smith Jr. is a good player. But if I look at ceilings, I'm thinking of potential. Ben Simmons doesn't have a jump shot and will never have a jump shot.
At all. No, I shoot better than him from the floor.
And I realize he's a 6'10" point guard. But if you're looking at ceiling here, I think Dennis Smith Jr. could possibly have a higher ceiling if he became like, this is a huge stretch. Don't take this with a grain of salt. But if he became like a Damian Lillard kind of guy, that's very loose analogy there.
Right.
But Dennis Smith Jr. could develop a jump shot. He's proven that statistically, catch and shoot's gotten a lot better. He's got to have the ball in his hands. He's super athletic guard. Maybe, I guess Russell Westbrook's more of a better analogy than Damian Lillard for Dennis Smith. But that's a very high ceiling, like getting to Russell Westbrook level. Yeah. I guess purely in the fact that Dennis Smith isn't limited with his jump shot like Ben Simmons is, I could see a higher ceiling there. Now, no discredit to Ben Simmons because Ben Simmons is a better player than Dennis Smith, no question.
Right.
But ceiling-wise, I could see Dennis Smith Jr. have a higher ceiling.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that because you know exactly what Ben Simmons is, right? I mean, you know every facet of his game, and can he improve on what he brings to the court? Absolutely. I'm not going to say that he can't improve. But to your point, he has no ability to shoot the basketball right now, and it just doesn't feel like he's ever going to develop that. Like you said, Dennis Smith is kind of one of those prototype players where it feels like he can do so many things on the court depending on what the situation is. He's improved his shooting percentage both in Dallas and in New York, and I mean, he's playing very well for the Knicks right now.
Yeah.
So I could definitely see a scenario when, you know, Dennis Smith has more impact on the basketball court than Ben Simmons does. It also depends on, you know, how you define ceiling. Is it player progression? Is it legacy left behind? Like, you know, Simmons is probably going to do so much more in his career because of the players that are surrounding him in Philly. Now, if, you know, the Knicks can build up and Dennis Smith is a piece there for the long haul, then maybe you have a discussion like that. But those questions are so hard to nail down. I mean, it's why people for years have debated LeBron versus MJ versus Kobe. There's no set definition of what, you know, the greatest legacy is. And similarly, I would probably say there's no set definition on what a higher ceiling is.
That's a good point.
But both players, I think, have very, very good futures.
Yeah.
And, you know, Ben is certainly surrounded with more right now, whereas Dennis Smith is more of a lone wolf, and we've seen how that could get him into trouble at times. But yeah, I wouldn't disagree with you when you say that there is a scenario when DSJ has a better future.
Yeah, and with Ben Simmons, about his jump shot, there's two angles here. One, if he hasn't been able to develop one by now, what gives you the reason to believe he will?
Right.
I mean, but building off of that, the second point is he's never had to have a jump shot. And what's crazy is he still doesn't need one to be successful. In high school, of course he doesn't need a jump shot because he's dunking on everyone. Even in college, he doesn't need a jump shot. And in the NBA, what's crazy is he still doesn't need a jump shot. You can be limited with no jump shot. And for Ben Simmons, he's a 6'10" point guard, a distributor, athletic guy, and can drive around a lot of players, especially with mismatches. He doesn't need a jump shot. So why would he develop one? Right. Why wouldn't he just continue to be the player he is? So that's why I see it. But we already know who Ben Simmons is, and he's probably not going to develop a ton much further. But where he started at is so high.
Right.
So he's not going to drop off a lot, but I don't think he's going to have some drastic improvement where he adds another attribute or facet to his game.
Yeah, very quickly, you know, Simmons is an LSU grad. Obviously, recently in the news, there's all the talk about, well, not just talk, there's proof that Will Wade, head coach at LSU, has been offering, you know, deals with sponsors to players. You know, as a former LSU player, do you think Ben Simmons gets caught up in any of that discussion?
I don't know. I mean, so
he was such a high-profile player that went to LSU.
Yeah,
and LSU was not good at that time.
No, and Will Wade and Ben Simmons was before Will Wade's, right? Was he before Will Wade?
That was
Will Wade's,
what, 3 years ago?
This is Will Wade's first or second year.
Yeah. Okay. So then definitely.
So he's before Will Wade's time. Regardless, it does not look good for LSU.
No.
Specifically, the player caught up right now is Javonte Smart, where Will Wade's on tape. An FBI tapped phone call. I didn't even realize how in-depth this was.
Yeah.
Of like many expletives used, but
yes.
Offers to Javonte Smart, and then he's caught up with other people that have gotten jail time recently.
Yeah.
Like, less than a year, but like 6 to 9 months jail time. It doesn't look good, and there's possible evidence that the FBI has more phone calls that they haven't released yet. But it does not look good for LSU. A lot of people are saying, well, LSU should sit its coach for the rest of the season to just try to not have any
Which
more.
LSU is a very solid team this year. There are people that have them legitimately making a run to the Final Four.
Yeah, and if they beat Vanderbilt, they win the SEC tournament. They win the SEC for the first time since 2009.
So
and Vanderbilt hasn't won an SEC game. Regardless, Will Wade's been a great coach with the players he's had.
Well, yeah.
But the means of obtaining those players, probably a little sketchy.
Someone's playing franchise mode with salary cap off.
So LSU fans, it doesn't look really good at all.
Oh. And I mean, not to just pile on LSU.
Yeah.
It's so, this discussion, and we are way off topic. We'll get back to your questions in a second. The whole topic of, how much cheating goes on in college sports. I have no doubt that it goes on in nearly every program.
Of course.
Now, I'm not going to name programs and say, yeah, it goes on there and it goes on there. Because I don't know that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't, it's sad that it doesn't surprise me anymore. And I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, man, I know friends that want to be coaches, college coaches one day. And I was thinking, man, how do you respond to that where it's been your lifelong dream to coach at, this level and you finally get the chance and you're excited, and then all of a sudden you're faced with, these situations where, okay, if in order to go get the best guy, you're going to have to offer him money. And if you don't, then the program's going to be mad at you for not bringing in top talent. You can get fired. And how do you deal with that pressure? And it's unfortunate that sports, even in something like sports, people find ways to muddy the waters.
It's unfortunate. Like in almost any industry, the higher up you go, the more borderline illegal things go on with, you think of high-level business and embezzlement and financial areas. And then in coaching, high-level coaches, are you talking about like people with pure hearts, high school coaches that want to get to the college level and coach at the next level? Then you get up there in these big-level programs, you realize that a lot of people are saying, all right, for you to take that next step, you have to cheat here.
Yeah.
Which is really unfortunate. And like you said, like we can't just point fingers necessarily. No. But it's common sense to say that cheating goes on in a lot of high-level programs, at least to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate. But it's kind of what it is, and it's weird that we're getting more and more numb to these things.
Yeah, exactly.
Because there's been horrible things come out with like the Jerry Sandusky thing at Penn State and other things, and then
Rick
we're
Pitino at LSU or Louisville,
and then we're just getting more and more numb to like, oh, it's just a coach cheating and playing players. It's kind of unfortunate.
Yeah, Sean Miller at Arizona too. He's set to testify, and
Will Wade possibly. They're trying to subpoena them right now, so they'll have to. If they go on trial, they're either going to say, all right, I'm going to commit perjury and go to prison. Or I'm going to come clean, which could have a lot of stuff.
Could really, really mess some programs up. Olin this morning talked about, he's like, the only defense that I have for Will Wade is when they ask you, all right, so what was this piece of the pie that you were talking about? You say, man, you've got to come down to Baton Rouge and try this bakery. We have a $50,000 piece of pie down here.
Yeah.
So, it's a tough spot.
Quickly to your point about Ben Simmons. Yeah. Dennis Smith Jr. was caught, or they came out at NC State. He
was on that list.
$70,000, like proven. And nothing's happened to him. I don't really know what can. Right. So Ben Simmons will be fine.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he'll stay as removed as possible.
And I forgot, you're right. I forgot he was on that list.
Yeah.
All right. Well, man, quite a tangent. But
this could be honestly an entire podcast.
It really could. And I was actually thinking about that when I was like, man, we need to bring that up. So, we'll have to put something in the description about that. But, and I'm sure as this story progresses, after the national championship, when the legal battle is going on, I'm sure we'll talk about it more. But it's sad. It really is. It hurts me to know that, something that we love on such a pure level, right, for the love of the game, people still find ways to cheat and to make it about them and not about, the kids and the game itself. So anyway, all right, next question for you. We've had two really good questions so far. What do you think of the new NCAA transfer portal with the almost free agency that's opening up for college football players? And how do you think Jalen Hurts and Nick Starkel are going to fare? And that's from AJ.
I will let you begin this.
Okay. Well, I got a chance to host the radio show right after, I guess, forgotten who. I think after Tate Martell transferred to Miami, right at the very beginning of the semester. And, I think I made my stance pretty clear on it. The transfer system is not new. That has always existed. What has, kind of come about lately is the transfer portal. And I do agree, it does create almost a free agent system for these kids. They let the coaches know in a very public manner, hey, I'm available, I'm looking to transfer, come talk to me. And, going right along with this cheating thing, you do wonder, all right, what makes a kid choose, Miami over West Virginia or something like that? And I mean, it could all be personal, school, the competition at that player slot or what have you. But it does feel like teams and schools are now able to just very publicly go, okay, here's our best pitch. Here's why you should come here. I don't like it from that perspective because these guys are amateur athletes. They're student athletes. And so, having a free agency pool kind of rubs me the wrong way. I'm also rubbed the wrong way by the fact that it's so easy to transfer now. And now that you have all these legal teams getting into it, and like with the Justin Fields case, I watched QB1 and he seems like a great kid, very, honest, down to earth kind of kid. If he is as portrayed on the show, I know his family, has done a good job grounding him. But Justin Fields' excuse for why he should transfer from Georgia and go to Ohio State is so weak to me. Yeah. I mean, yes, what happened to him is horrible. If it is true, and I think it is, a baseball player, called him a racial slur. He was kicked off the team for that, so applauding, UGA for taking that stance. But then for Fields to come out and say that I was emotionally, harmed and I'm not in a good place mentally because of this, and now I should get to go to a premier school and play starting quarterback for them. My question to him is, do you not think that's going to happen there too? I mean, obviously racism is horrible, and I'm not advocating for it whatsoever. That's not what I'm saying. And I'm not trying to water it down either. But what I am saying is, people are going to be horrible to you wherever you go, no matter how good you are. Yeah. I mean, even if the better you are, the more people are going to hate on you. I mean, look at LeBron, right? I mean, he's one of the best players to ever play the game, and yet people pick on him constantly.
He's the most loved
day.
And the most hated.
Exactly. And so, horrible people are going to do horrible things, but for you to leverage that and say, oh, well, no, I mean, the reputation between me and George is irreparable. I'm going, and I should get to circumvent the regulations put in place by the NCAA to prevent free agency. Yeah, I get a free pass from that. I'm going to go play at Ohio State because my feelings got hurt. That doesn't sit well with me. And so I'm interested to hear your take on this, but I'm not a huge fan of it. I know it gives kids like Nick Starkel, Jalen Hurts a chance who, they lost their jobs, and so they're going to go use their last year, or in Nick's case, last 2 years of eligibility. That's great. I love that part of it. Go play, go get on tape, go have a chance at your dreams in the NFL. Yeah. But when people kind of, find loopholes in the system, that bugs me.
I agree. I think the thing I want to discuss is how you talked about it's so public now. Yeah. Before, because transfers have always been around. We've talked about this. I mean, Troy Aikman had transferred when he was in college, and that was huge. But it was private. So, the transfer portal, and Nick Starkel's talked about this, the only thing that's changed is now there's a portal I enter my name to. But with that, it's so public, and now it becomes a bidding war. All the premier programs are going to bid and recruit these guys, whereas before the portal, now it's private in smaller schools have a chance, and it's more conversational behind the scenes, and it's not very public and marketed towards this crazy huge thing. So I liked how it was private and it was all about the kid, and he wasn't just getting all these offers from these schools. And now with the portal, how public it's gotten, now schools have a route to indirectly recruit kids even after they're signed to schools. Right. What's going to stop an Alabama or an LSU from indirectly recruiting 5 stars that they didn't sign on National Signing Day? Yeah. So because of the 4-game rule, they can transfer and not have to sit out a year. Or we saw the Justin Fields thing. Like, I agree. Like, the racism thing is tough because racism is horrible, and we're not advocating for it, not watering it down. But at the same time, we're not advocating leveraging it. If he hasn't truly been impacted the way he said he was, but he's lying about that, then that's also horrible.
Right.
On leveraging racism just so you can go play and better yourself. Now, I'm not saying, and that's the tough thing is it's hard for us to understand. We don't know truly how he's been affected.
Absolutely.
We can't step into his shoes or in his head or in his heart. So that's tough. But there's still possible loopholes, and that's unfortunate. Yeah. And honestly, there will always be loopholes. Yeah. The thing I most don't like is how public it is and how it has given a route to just this bidding war, whereas before the portal, it was private and kids were doing this on their own accord and honestly probably finding better fits instead of just the pressure to sign with these big-name programs and satisfy these crazy offers.
Right, and you didn't have, I mean, at least publicly, you didn't have schools like OU blocking transfers from fifth-year seniors who are just trying to get on the freaking field. I mean, not Trevor. I've forgotten the backup's name at OU. He's transferred to West Virginia now.
Trying to blank on his name, too.
OU blocked his application to transfer. He was going to be a career backup if he stayed at OU. This way he gets to transfer to West Virginia. He gets to start for his final year in school. He gets to try and make a name for himself. Let the kid go. I mean, you beat West Virginia. Austin Kendall. Yeah, you beat West Virginia last year with Will Grier. Austin Kendall, I guarantee you, is not better than Will Grier.
Yeah.
So what are you worried about? So, it's frustrating, but we'll go ahead and move on. Let's pepper in one of the questions on faith here, and I'll give this one to you. How is decreasing understanding of a relational gospel and the growing lack of salvation-induced accountability affecting the modern church? Asks Blake Harvey.
Great question, and I'm not sure if we've talked about this before, but I'm going to go down the route of a consumer mindset with church. This question has multiple parts. So the decreasing understanding of a relational gospel with a modern church. So it's no secret that modern churches, some are massive and huge churches. So automatically, you compare that to the earlier church that before there was the church building, there was still the church, and it was meeting in homes and being relational and very personal relationships with one another. With a massive church, that makes it so much harder. Obviously, massive churches do great things, and they're able to raise more money and go and have more resources to go out and serve, for example, internationally. But there's that they take a step back in the relational aspect of the church. So the big churches struggle with that, and you can so easily hide and so easily view church as through a consumer lens. So I'm going to go to church, man, I'm going to love the heck out of this worship. It's like you're being sung to. You're not singing along, you're being sung to. I'm going to go hear a great sermon, then I'm gone. And then my Bible's a dust collector from Sunday afternoon to the next Sunday morning.
In and out.
Yeah. So that's tough because big churches can really struggle with that. And then in the growing lack of salvation-induced accountability, and that goes with the same thing. It's through the consumer mindset. You show up, and it's not like I'm going to be poured into individually and relationally and then go out and then use church as a pedestal to continue going out and serving more because but you're supposed to be serving in the church regardless and practicing that servanthood so you can serve outside of the church. It's become way too much consumer where I go, I consume, and I leave. So that's really affecting the church because the church has less reach when less people are serving in the church. Because if they're not serving in the church, how are they supposed to serve outside of the church?
Right. And, I think something that kind of hinders that is, as society progresses and we have new technology, it's, helpful and harmful at the same time. I honestly think a huge detriment to this service-based, aspect and certainly a true accountability that the church holds over people is online streaming. It's so easy to wake up and think, I'm not feeling great or the weather's not great or, a variety of excuses and just turn on the online service and feel like, okay, great, I've got my church for the day. And don't get me wrong, it serves its purpose. There are people that cannot make it to church on a regular basis. My grandmother's one of them. That's how she stays connected to the body, however she can. She watches those services. But at the same time, sometimes we as Christians can find loopholes and start to indulge in the online streaming service, or like you said, just the basic consumerism. Show up, be poured into, but not give back. And that's something that, I know that I've certainly dealt with over my career at Texas A&M, serving with my church in Grace, and something that I know I'll continue to work on as I transition back to the DFW and find a way to serve at Countryside. But that's a great question, because you don't realize how quickly we are to fall into that pattern of just showing up, feeling like we're doing the right thing, right? Our soul is encouraged from the message that we hear, but at the same time, we're challenged and called to give that back, to use the growth that we're having and to spread that around to others. Yeah. And it's so easy to fall out of that.
The confusion, like I said, is it's with the lack of a relation, like the relational gospel aspect has been lost to an extent in a lot of churches, because like we've been saying, you show up to church and a lot of people's views of a Christian is, yes, I know about Jesus and I show up to church on Sundays. And that's just a taker mentality, and takers cause a lot of harm. And I've written about this on Elevated Sports. I mean, the whole point of community, the question is not what community you're in, but how are you serving your community?
Yeah.
And you and me both, I mean, not to be on our high horse, the last thing I want to do, but we want to be able to, the things we're speaking on, we'll be able to also say we're doing them. Like we both have served in our churches here, and that has allowed us to continue to grow relationally with people inside the church. And that allows us to be able to go serve others outside the church. Like I said, if you're not serving in the church, how are you supposed to serve believers and non-believers outside of the church? Sure. Because if you're taking within the church and you're a consumer, then you're going to be a consumer outside of the church. You can't just be a consumer on Sundays and expect to go be a servant-hearted person the rest of the week. You practice serving and being poured into and pouring into others the whole 9 yards on Sundays and within your church, and then that builds you up to be able to do that same thing when you're not surrounded by your community.
Well, a great question there from Blake for sure, and we have a couple more that we'll get in there as well. Garrett would like to know what the Astros' chances are this season. You and I are Texas Rangers fans, which makes this question painful to answer. Any thoughts on the Stros?
Well, better chances than the Texas Rangers. I can assure you of that. What's the over/under for the records in the AL West?
I mean, it depends on where you look.
Are the Angels number one?
No. Okay. The Angels are definitely number two. The Astros are consensus. I mean, unless I've missed a major publication, the Astros are the consensus.
Because you've talked about the Angels possibly having a really good season.
Yeah,
this year.
So the Angels are at a weird spot. They're kind of in no man's land. They didn't do a ton in free agency, but they've got a lot of talent on that team to where if they get on a roll, if their pitching can stay healthy, that was the issue last year, was they had a very, very solid team, but their pitching was so unhealthy all season. They used like 14 different starting pitchers in the first 2 months of the season. It was absolutely ridiculous. Garrett Richards has left. He's in San Diego now. We'll see if he works out with the Padres, if he can stay healthy. So, I mean, the Angels, a lot of people have them going right at 500, being second in the West. I think for the Astros, I think you have as good a chance as any team to win your division. I think there's no doubt that the Astros have that advantage. They have the talent. They have the farm system. They have guys like Forrest Whitley coming through the pipeline that will contribute, I'm sure, in the second half of the season. So there's not much competition from the American League West. I don't think the Astros will play well in the playoffs, though. You look at what they have missing from their team. Marwin Gonzalez, their best utility player, leaves to sign with the Minnesota Twins. You lose Lance McCullers to Tommy John surgery for the season. Dallas Keuchel has left via free agency, and I mean, technically could be re-signed, but I don't think he's going to come back to Houston. And so the Astros, first and foremost, have a big hole in their rotation that they need to fill with the likes of maybe Colin McHugh, Brad Peacock, guys that have filled the role but not excelled in that in the past. And so when I look around the league and I look at rotations and lineups like what the Red Sox and the Yankees can put together, I don't see a scenario when the Astros come out of the American League, but Then again, I didn't really see it in 2017 either. Maybe that was my Rangers-colored spectacles on, but, as objectively as I can say, I think the Astros will win the AL West, but you look at who they match up. They probably match up with either the Red Sox or the Yankees in the first round of the playoffs, and right now, I don't see them getting by.
With a losing piece for a rotation that carried them for a large majority of games.
Yeah.
I mean, their rotation was 5 deep of aces. I mean, you had amazing guys, and now, losing McCullers and then Keuchel is tough. And have you heard reports on Keuchel's possible landing spot?
Yeah, I mean, people have talked about him going to San Diego. People have talked about him going to LA. A lot of momentum seems like that he would end up on the West Coast, but at the end of the day, I really don't know. I mean, you had the whole Bryce Harper saga where he was pinged all over the map basically until he signed with the Phillies. So, Keuchel's not a top of the level rotation guy anymore. I think he's a 3, 4, or 5 for you, depending on the team, just because he doesn't throw hard. And last year, his ground ball pitch was just not very good. He was getting a lot more. He was hitting a lot more barrels, and he relies on the ground ball, and his double play rate was down last year too. So I don't know where Keuchel ends up, but I don't think this year is another year for the Astros. I think next year, 2021, when you can really load up your rotation with what's coming up in your farm system. I mean, Forrest Whitley, as long as he stays healthy, the dude's going to be a monster. So, not the year for the Astros this season, if you're asking me, but we'll see. Let's see here. Okay, this comes from Richard, and this was funny. I saw this on Twitter. I would have been down there had I not been working at the time, but life is funny that way. Last weekend in Houston, a crazy A&M fan tried to get Aggie legend Michael Barish to sign a human baby. Do you think that is weird and or funny? And would you sign a baby if asked? I'm gonna lob that one to you.
Gosh, I did not prepare myself for such question. As a parent, I don't think I'd Simba my baby to be signed.
To be clear, this A&M fan was not the parent of the child either. He stole the child.
Have mercy. But let's look at it through the player's perspective. I would sign a baby. Yeah. But I would not sign. It's got to
be a washable marker, right?
I would not offer a toddler to get signed, especially if it's not even my own. Yeah. But from I wouldn't even know the parent's perspective, but imagining I would know the parent's perspective.
Yeah, put yourselves in that parent's shoes for a second.
I would not offer my baby to get signed, but I would be inclined to sign a baby.
I think if I was ever in the position where I was offering my child to be signed by another human being, there's something going massively wrong.
Why do you want something to get signed that will be removed? You want a signature to be on something you can keep.
Unless you were just planning on giving that kid their first tattoo.
One shower a year kind of quota here for the baby.
Yeah, just get it signed on the upper arm, and then just right to the parlor. Like, hey man, I need you to make this permanent on my 2-year-old. My permission.
Okay, tangent. If you're a tattoo artist, do you ink up a baby?
I mean, there are babies that get tattoos with their parents' permission. I've seen it happen. Like, you'll have like a 3 or 4-year-old that has, and it's not like a sleeve, but it's something small, like their their initials or something like that. I've seen it on children though, not anyone that I know. Wow, this is
a sleeve and a miniature baby-sized Hell's Angels leather jacket.
Little 2-year-old just walks in looking like Jay Sternberger with just all kinds of symbolism.
Dude, my baby's rocking the barbed wire for their second birthday.
Man. Love mom. If I'm a parent, I'm probably not. I'll be like, hey man, if you have a ball or a piece of paper, I'll sign that, but I'm not going to sign your kid. That's a little weird. To be fair, Barish responded on Twitter. That clip was hilarious. He responded on Twitter by saying it was one of the funniest moments that he's ever been involved in a dugout. So, had to get your perspective on that.
That is awesome.
A lot of these questions, you get credit for asking them. Richard, you're also getting credit for conducting this weird act. It was my buddy Richard, who was holding the baby and screaming at Michael. I'll show you the Twitter clip if you haven't already seen it.
It was Richard?
It was Richard holding the baby. It was really, really funny. I'll show you after the show.
Wow. Legend.
Yeah, it was great. Speaking of which, actually, you know what? We're going to move past that. I'll come back to A&M baseball in a second. Ryan wants to know, is Trey Young making a case to be the second best prospect in last year's draft after Luka?
I mean, he has to be.
Yeah.
He had a 4-game stretch averaging like 40 points, 10 assists. I mean, yeah, it's a 4 OT game, but he still had 49 points.
Right.
I mean, yeah, there's indirect Luka and Trey Young beef. But I mean, give credit where credit's due. Trey Young is a phenomenal player. Not even just for a rookie. Trey Young is looking to be the future of the Atlanta Hawks franchise.
Yeah.
An incredible player. Honestly, I want to take off the Luka colored glasses because, I mean, I could hear the argument that Trey Young should be Rookie of the Year because
there's a lot of literature coming out on that.
I mean,
right now.
Trey Young's been phenomenal. Yeah. I mean, now from the other flip of the coin, statistically, he's the worst defensive point guard in the league. Like, he's not been good on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
But scoring and shooting wise, he's been phenomenal, and he's putting up crazy numbers in the assist and points category. I mean, yeah, Trey Young's been phenomenal. Luka won the award a month or two ago. Someone compared it to the Ben Simmons. He would hope. Someone compared it to the Ben Simmons, Donovan Mitchell, Rookie of the Year award, in the fact that both players were so highly regarded and you thought it was close, but Ben Simmons ended up running away with it, and the award wasn't even really that close.
Right.
So I could see that happening to where both players are so dynamic, and in the fans' eyes, it's, oh man, it's neck and neck. They're both so good that Luka may win it convincingly.
Yeah.
I could see that happening. Regardless, though, Trey Young's been phenomenal.
Man, how stupid do you feel right now if you're the Phoenix Suns, Sacramento Kings? You took. I mean, Ayton and Bagley haven't been. Bagley can't stay healthy. That was his issue. Was he's, when he's on the court, he does decent things, but he's not a game changer.
And he's not a bruiser with the position he's having to play.
Right. He's just. You want a guy who I guess is fearless at his position. It just doesn't feel like. It almost feels like at times Bagley's afraid to get hurt again, and that's fair. If you have an injury, prone streak, I'd be protecting it too. But when you looked at, and I remember all the conversation about this draft, and people wanted the Mavericks to take Mo Bamba, and I was one of them. I felt like we needed that interior presence, and Bamba had played well at Texas. I was worried about his kind of fearless streak in the paint, but his length, his size, I was just like, sign me up. And then people started talking about Luka Doncic, and I was like, man, he's over in Europe. What's the competition like?
Yeah.
Luka has been everything that he was advertised to be and more. And, Trey Young, I had a lot of questions about him because, he could shoot the lights out of the building at OU, but it didn't do anything for his team. They still lost.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was worried about, Trey Young's ability to take over a game. And to their credit, both of them have proved me wrong, more or less. Luka, though, I think, if you asked either team, I still think both the Mavericks and the Hawks, given that third overall, or it was 3, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Would take Luka Doncic. I don't think you could honestly say I would take Trey Young over Doncic because of the defensive aspect. Mm-hmm. Doncic can do it on both sides of the court. He's a distributor. He can shoot. He can run the floor. Trey Young is a great shooter, but man, he's a liability on the defensive side. So I would still say you take Doncic if you have to redo it.
I just think we're all so surprised. I'm with you. I thought Mo Bamba was going to be a Maverick, and I was going to be excited.
Yeah.
We were still talking about trading Dennis Smith Jr. straight up for Mo Bamba like a few weeks ago.
Yeah, we were.
Because Mo Bamba, you saw it in draft workouts, very good form. He can stretch the floor, a shot blocker. He seemed like the perfect raw piece to add into a Maverick system. But no one thought. It's like I was worried about Luka too. I was worried about his athleticism and his ability to create shots and do what he was doing in the NBA, what he was doing in Europe. No one thought he could do what he was doing. Yeah, like the Mavericks were high on him for sure. But Mark Cuban's not going to say, oh yeah, we expected this kind of performance out of Luka Doncic. Mark Followell won't say that. Derek Harper won't say that. His ability to create separation is unbelievable. I had no idea he had that kind of step back in his arsenal. And yeah, he's never going to be a great defender. He won't be as bad as Dirk, but he's not going to be a two-way player in its definition. But he's not a crazy liability. But we've been so pleasantly surprised with Luka Doncic. But if we had to redo the draft without this season being played, I could see Atlanta taking Trey Young again.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have this season in context, you look at Luka and his production and his ability to create shots and be so dynamic, it's hard. It would be hard to say no to Luka Doncic.
Yeah.
As the number 1 overall pick, because Ayton will be good, and it's hard to pass. How do you pass up on DeAndre Ayton? How do you pass up on a Marvin Bagley before the season being played?
Right.
They were dynamic in college. But with this season being played in the context we have now, it'd be hard to pass up on Luka over number 1 overall.
Yeah, and I think a lot of teams are going to be a lot more willing to pull the trigger on European stars now. Doncic has done a lot of people a lot of favors by his performance this season.
In recent years, the European haters have been silenced. New York fans were disgusted with the Porzingis pick.
The little kid
I was
his
shocked.
eyes out. Yeah.
I was shocked because there was a ton of good talent left in that draft, and they went Kristaps Porzingis. I'm thinking, who is this?
Yeah.
And man, have those haters been silenced. And then when I wasn't a Luka hater, but I was a Luka skeptic for sure.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of Dallas fans were. And we were, Luka Doncic, yeah, we traded up for him, but I'm still not sure. And it didn't take that long for us to be like, yeah, what were we thinking?
Okay, yeah. Luka's the future. Absolutely. I agree 100%. It's and I mean, you're playing a game of chance anyways, right? You're going to hit on some, you're going to lose some.
Yeah.
So, very, very glad that the Mavericks hit on this one. Let's do a baseball one again. With Bryce Harper signing the largest contract in MLB history last week, what does that mean for Mike Trout? What does that mean for Mike Trout, who will be a free agent at the end of this year? We talked about this a little bit on our last podcast.
Uh-huh. Well, we were praising Mike Trout.
Yes.
And then now Bryce Harper said, yeah, of course I'm going to try to convince Mike Trout to come to San Diego.
Yeah.
Not San Diego.
Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's tampering investigations going on right now. Yeah. Literally the fact
Adam Silver's just screaming right now, hoping Manfred does something about tampering.
The fact that literally they were saying the fact that Harper said, I will be talking to Trout in 2020 may save him from a massive tampering fine and all kinds of things. Because like the fact that he used another player's name publicly in the media is a huge no-no. Mm-hmm. But he did say in 2020. So if you're playing semantics, he hasn't tampered this year. Mm-hmm. He's just looking ahead to 2020.
And around that time he said that, the Angels, there was reports of them considering offering Trout a 10-year deal.
Yeah,
I don't think I've heard much of that furthering.
Yeah, here's the deal. I don't think the Angels have done such a poor job of managing their talent in recent years that I'd find it hard to believe that Trout, who's an East Coast guy, would turn down the possibility of signing either with the Phillies or with the Yankees for the rest of his career in favor of taking a West Coast team that historically way underperforms in the regular season, and if they make it to the playoffs, they're lucky to do so. I think this is his last year. Technically his contract runs through I think 2023 or 2024, but he has an opt-out after this season. And I think he'll take it, and I think he'll go to the East Coast, and I think he will be a Philadelphia Philly or a New York Yankee. I just think, like I said, he's from New Jersey. He grew up a Phillies fan, but hard to scoff at an opportunity to play in the pinstripes if that's what's on the table.
Yeah.
I think, as I tweeted this out sometime this last week, Mike Trout has a higher career WAR, cumulative WAR, than both Bryce Harper and Manny Machado combined.
That's just stupid.
It's the difference in their skill level and what they mean to their team on an individual basis isn't even close. Bryce Harper has hit over 300 one time during his career for a season. One time. The shortest season that Mike Trout has ever played at the major league level was in 2017. He hurt his thumb. He was out for 6 weeks. His WAR for that season was still higher than Manny Machado has ever had for a single season. Mike Trout is a generational player, but because he plays in Anaheim where there's no pitching, he doesn't get the credit that he deserves. And so I think you put him on a team like in Philadelphia where, I don't think Harper's going to live up to that contract. I don't think he's going to live up to half of that contract. But you surround him with talent. You put him on a team that is a World Series contender, and I think Mike Trout solidifies his Hall of Fame status in the back half of his career. I mean, he already should be a Hall of Famer.
Oh, yeah. He's solidified it.
His stats are disgusting. But I think, I guess I'll say he accumulates the hardware in the second half of his career. On a different team.
I hope so.
Out of the AL West, thank goodness.
You hope for a guy of that. That guy's just a bodacious baseball player.
Ooh, bodacious, I like it.
And he's also an incredible guy. So I would bet 98% of fans hope that he can have some hardware to add to his great performance off and on the field.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Let's get another theology question in here. Let's see here. Okay, this one comes from Kim. Do Christians need to obey the Old Testament law?
Quick answer, no. Next question. This can be looked at from a lot of different angles. Messianic Jews who have faith in Christ may put a lot more value in Old Testament law.
Right.
But at its core, Old Testament law was just a shadow of what's to come. Romans 6 talks about the Old Testament law. The law was made so that sin may increase, and that's translated as the law was made so that sin may be made more obvious. Look, the purpose of the Old Testament law, I'll look at 3 different purposes here. One purpose was it allowed Israel to know God better. The law told Israel was one way of God telling Israel what's important to him, his heart. Another aspect of what I just said is the Old Testament law was so that sin may be more obvious, so that basically it's like a huge humbling card towards Israel, like, wow, I have to live up to this entire law? That's what holiness demands?
Yeah.
I can't do that. And then it automatically sets up, it's like, I don't want to diminish Jesus to a punchline. That sounds very blasphemous or heretical. But it's set up for the death and resurrection of Jesus and Jesus coming to earth to be that much more powerful, because the Old Testament law had groomed Israel and groomed, I guess, believing Gentiles that they can't live up to the law. They can't be perfect. They can't achieve holiness on their own. They have to have Christ do that for them. And then the third way is that Israel was able to have earthly blessings from the law. They follow the law, God blesses them with earthly blessings. So the law, and then Jesus came and fulfilled that law. So no, we're not called to obey the Old Testament law. Even things of like tithing, 10%. I mean, it's a good benchmark, but there's... Yeah, but it's more about giving to where God is telling you to give in your heart. Yeah. And I didn't realize for years, 10%, give 10%. But if you're focused on the number 10%,
you've missed the point.
Yeah, if you missed the point, you're not giving out of a heart desiring to give. So the Old Testament law, no, we don't need to obey it. And there's obviously some things like animal sacrifices. Of course we're not need to obey that because Jesus is the eternal sacrifice. But there's some things that are still great moral compasses, moral codes, and also ways to continue to worship Jesus. But no, we're not bound by the Old Testament law. The death and resurrection of Jesus is the new law, if you will. I mean, we put our faith in Christ, not our hope in following the law to achieve holiness, because we've been granted holiness by the perfect blood of Christ. Yeah.
No, I agree 100% with that. You hit the nail on the head that Christ's death and resurrection circumvents the old law, and while they are, like you said, a compass, a guiding principle for us to live our lives, Christ died so that we wouldn't have to sacrifice animals on a weekly basis and whatnot. Let's get a couple more in here. Is there one that like catches your eye here out of the the few remaining. I figure we can do one more sports and then maybe one more.
Let's see here. I think we could talk about. We could go Antonio Brown or Rosen thing.
Ooh, I like Antonio Brown.
Okay.
So last night, I'm assuming there was.
Yeah, it was like the. I always forget his name. The Sixers traded for him. I wanted him to be a Maverick.
Tobias Harris?
Tobias Harris, man. It's like the Tobias Harris thing. You go to bed, nothing happens. You wake up to all these reports. So I went to bed fairly early, around 11, and I woke up. And was that yesterday? When did that happen?
That was like this evening or last night, early morning, because I was listening to CBS radio driving up here to the office, and they were talking about people were trading texts and reports between 2 and 4 a.m.
Yeah, so I wake up and Antonio Brown to the Bills?
Yeah.
The Bills?
Yeah.
Like, wow, it's kind of gross. That doesn't really satisfy my sports palate. I wanted him to go to a big market. And then I see Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown now tweets #fake news to the trade. So I haven't read a ton into it, so I'd love for you
slap to the Bills.
I'd love for you to enlighten me on kind of the whole hodgepodge of what happened.
Well, so from what I gathered from reading tweets and whatnot this morning, the Steelers, Antonio Brown's stock is sinking like the Titanic. Mm-hmm. It is going down so quickly because teams are figuring out, oh wow, this guy was a huge head case in the locker room. Yeah. We do not want to pair him with any young teammates in our franchise, and so. It's increasingly looking like the Steelers are not going to get a first-round pick this year for Antonio Brown. It looks like they're going to have to settle with a 2 and then like future considerations or a 3 and 4. I mean, his stock has dropped like the price of Madden. It's bad. What happened was the Bills were interested in acquiring him. I'm not exactly sure for what price, but Ian Rappaport reported that the Bills were on the cusp of securing Antonio Brown, and then sometime during the night, the trade fell apart. The Steelers decided, no, never mind. We don't want to. I guess we're not going to settle for that package that you want to send to us. But ESPN was running with the story that the final details were being, just dotting I's and crossing T's type deal, and so. A lot of secondary news sites, third-party news sites trying to jump ahead of the story started saying Antonio Bill is going to the Browns. My fantasy league that I play...
Antonio Bill is going to the Browns.
I mean... Okay, I didn't get much sleep last night either.
To pair with Olivier Vernon. He just went to the Browns.
Did you see Antonio Brown was not going to the Bills? Let me correct that mistake. Did you see that Kevin Zeitler, the offensive lineman, today is his birthday. At like 8 a.m., the Browns tweeted out his birthday and was like, retweet to wish him a happy birthday. 3 hours later, they had dealt him to the Giants for Olivier Vernon.
Gosh.
Just a cold world. But
he'll get to block for Josh Rosen.
Yeah, well, I mean, man, those rumors are picking up fast. Yeah, all that to say, Antonio Brown is not going to the Bills. He might be going to the Browns. Who knows?
Here's what I'll say. If you are a team that... If you're still molding your team, don't go after Antonio Brown.
No.
Antonio Brown needs to go to a system where no nonsense is tolerated. You have a quarterback that is a proven quarterback. Because Antonio Brown's already talking mess about Ben Roethlisberger.
Dude, I know.
And people are tweeting at him and telling Antonio Brown... You're taking this for granted. You have no idea how good you have it. You have a Hall of Famer quarterback as throwing you the ball, and you're complaining.
Yeah, go to Washington, play with Case Keenum. Then let's see what happens.
But I don't know if this is likely, but I think of a possible perfect scenario is Antonio Brown to the Patriots. You have a franchise that doesn't tolerate nonsense. You throw him into the system. You throw him to Tom Brady, where if Antonio Brown complains about Tom Brady, he's ostracized from all of sports community.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. If you're the Jets, why do you go after a 31 Antonio Brown, who is a head case, who's going to stir up drama, and throw him with, it'd be awesome Bills? For Sam Darnold to have, I'm like, hypothetical.
Hypothetically, okay.
Yeah, it'd be great for Sam Darnold to have a guy like Antonio Brown to throw to. But man, that
what
brings
cost?
so much drama.
Yeah.
So I think if you're a team that has a proven quarterback, that is I think that's a much more likely common sense fit than a team that's developing and has a young quarterback that hasn't proven himself.
Yeah. All right, well, let's end it on this. There's let's see here. We've got one more faith-based question here. Do you want the second one or the last one on the list here?
I think the second one.
Okay. So what happens if you share the gospel and that person does not come to know Jesus, but never hears again, and that person never comes to know Jesus because they didn't have the opportunity? I guess it's...
Yeah.
So clear that up.
Yeah, so here's the question. Basically,
it's from Lauren.
So basically the idea is, one, what about people who never get to hear the gospel?
Okay.
And never get to get saved, never have the opportunity? And two, what happens if I share the gospel with someone, and that was the only time they heard it, but they didn't accept, and then now they don't know Christ?
That's a heavy question in the day on.
Yeah, it's a tough question. I'm trying to figure out how to attack this question. I'll go for the first thing I mentioned of if someone never has the chance to hear Christ.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing is you look at Scripture, and in the Great Commission, go out, reach the nations. And then in the book of Revelation, it talks about in heaven, every nation will be represented.
Mm-hmm.
That word nation is broken down to mean people group. And people group can mean a group of 2 people, that is the only of its kind in the world, or a group of millions of people. But the Scripture promises, God promises that every people group will be represented in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
So that gives us confidence, the fact that there's 2 billion unreached people in this world right now. I did an awesome study with an older guy in the community that's now a missionary internationally. But he was walking us through this study on God's hearts for the nations. Look, there's 2 billion people in the world that don't know anyone who knows Christ, that knows anyone that knows Christ. Like they're always 2 people removed from Jesus. And those people groups will be represented in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
Because Scripture promises it. So that gives us hope in the fact that let's not limit God by saying if we don't reach them, no one will.
Right.
Because you look in the Middle East right now, there is a huge movement of Muslims having visions, having dreams of a man in a white robe. And they're told in their dream, go ask someone about this. And they're going to ask these missionaries, and it's Jesus in their dreams. And Muslims at great numbers are coming to faith in Christ because of visions and dreams. That's not missionaries.
Right.
So, yes, it's obviously hard to wrap our mind around, what if they never heard the gospel? Well, that's putting God in a box.
Yeah.
They don't have to hear the gospel to come to Christ because God uses us out of his grace. God doesn't have to use us to achieve his will. He graciously allows us to be a part of his will, but he does so much more outside of our missionary works. On the other flip of the coin, only 10% of missionaries go to unreached nations. 90% of missionaries go to nations that are already reached. So if you have a heart that is hurting, thinking of people that don't know Christ, that will never get to hear the gospel, be one of the 10% and increase that 10% of missionaries that go to unreached places. There's 2 billion people in this world that don't know anyone that knows Christ. And we're not sending very many missionaries to those places. So be a part of that solution. But also, be confident in the way God works. God's not bound by our limitations.
Right.
He works in spite of our limitations and uses us in spite of our limitations. So yes, I don't know how much this answers that question, but just because someone doesn't hear the gospel doesn't mean they won't come to faith. And also have hope that God continues to work. Pray for the nations, and then either pray for missionaries to go to unreached nations, be a missionary, or financially support. Just be a part of the movement to increase our evangelical efforts towards unreached nations.
Right. I love your analogy of, we don't want to put God in a box. The Scripture says that the word of God is alive and well and active, sharper than any two-edged sword. Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that you can extrapolate from that is, yes, the word is alive in the sense that when we read it, it does speak to us, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are lessons that we can glean from it every single time we pick up the Scripture. But also, like you're saying, the scripture or God's word and his will can accomplish things outside of, the limitations of me or you. So just because while we are challenged to go distribute the gospel and share the gospel to those that haven't heard it and those that are lost, just because you or I may not interact with an individual, there are plenty of other ways that person can realize there is a God, there's one true God, and come to faith. I mean, we are made in God's image. Nature screams of God's creation. I mean, the Bible says, like...
in Romans 1:18-20 talks about, like, we have an inner knowing of God being real.
That's
because
what I was
of
looking
creation.
for. Yeah, that's exactly what I was looking for. I was looking for that scripture, and I couldn't find it in Romans. But yes, man is born with an innate sense that there is a God, and it's not us. Our sin nature wants us to put us in that void. But the scripture is very clear that regardless of whether or not someone actually tells you there is a God, his son was Jesus, he died for us, we're without excuse because we're born with a nature put into us by our Creator that God is real and that he needs to be served. And so, it is a tough question because none of us know what the final plan, what the final result looks like. And so, to answer that question definitively is pretty nearly impossible. But like you said, in Revelation, God does give us a glimpse into the fact that there is clearly a plan for every single people group, every single tongue, every single tribe, every single nation will be represented in heaven. And so, while it may not be a definitive answer for our finite minds, God does have a plan, and he's willing to give us a glimpse into that. And so, I think your analogy of not putting God in a box is a perfect example. Well, that's going to do it, I think, for episode 30 of Double Covered Sports Talk. It was. We have a lot of fun doing the mailbag episodes and interacting with y'all and answering your questions and giving you guys shout outs. So thank you so much for submitting those questions and being willing to take part of the stuff that we're doing here. We love the fans, and we love getting to answer your questions. But that's going to do it for this episode. Man, Luke, it's time for spring break.
That's right. Making a 24-hour road trip to California.
You're going to spring training?
With a Phoenix spring training stop, Dodgers Rockies.
Yeah, you're going to have to let me know how that is because I was out in spring training, when I was 9 or 10. One of my favorite vacations ever.
I've never been to a spring training game.
Don't just go to the game if you can. Go before to the warm-ups. Go to the practice fields if y'all have time for that. Getting to see the players up close and personal.
Yeah.
Like they sit in, the practice fields are like youth fields almost, where everything's just chain link. And so you can go right up to the other side of the dugout and talk to the players.
I'll bring a baby, try to get a baby
exactly.
signed.
There you go. I talked to Michael Young when I was a youngster, and man, I still remember every single second of that interaction and whatnot. So anyway, but man, this was fun. We will do it again soon. Thank you guys so much for spending part of your day with us. Until next week, sometime, probably the end of the spring break week.
Yeah.
Y'all take it easy. Have a good one. We'll talk to you guys later.